Hello, my name is Gary Hoover with TBM Consulting Group. Welcome to our podcast where we will discuss the topic of reshoring along with recent trends and observations on both successes and lessons learned with our guest, Harry Moser. We appreciate you all joining us. Harry is the founder of the Reshoring Initiative and has more than 5 decades of experience in manufacturing. Harry's passion to support U.S. manufacturing led him to create the initiative well before the word reshoring became part of our nation's regular vernacular. Harry has been a powerful voice in many media outlets on this topic. In addition, Harry was an advisor to President Obama's 2012 insourcing forum at the White House. Earlier this year, we at TBM invited Harry to speak to us about the decision-making process to both reshore and nearshore. On today's podcast, Harry and I will extend our discussion to discuss and learn more around some of the recent successes and challenges of U.S. companies bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. So, welcome, Harry. Glad to have you with us.
Great to be here, Gary. It's a pleasure to be back.
One of the things we had talked about before or earlier was the critical success factors for reshoring to be successful strategy for U.S. business. Certainly, we've seen the trend, we've seen the acceleration, but we've also seen in many cases productivity is not increasing at the rate that one would expect. And with reindustrialization, the importance of productivity becomes even more paramount. And so what are your thoughts around that and its connection to automation and investment to improve productivity?
Manufacturing labor productivity was negative from mid-2022 until the first quarter of 2023, so negative, going down. And now it's turned positive. Unit labor costs are up substantially. So it's clear that we need a combination of more investment in automation and better training of more highly skilled workers. And in terms of automation itself, the investment in manufacturing buildings has surged. It's something like 2 times the historical rate. It's at record levels by far. But on the other hand, machine tool sales and I think other similar kind of equipment sales that go into those factories tend to be soft, down from last year or down from the last couple of years. So it's clear that the average U.S. company is not certainly not investing enough to achieve the productivity increases that the country needs. And now, so the question is, why not? And partially it's because their capacity utilization rate has fallen somewhere below 80, probably 77, 76, something like that percent. And traditionally, companies invest most aggressively when they're above 80%, because then they have the need. They got so much demand and they have the money and therefore they invest. And so I see one of my roles in reshoring is to bring them enough work to get them above that 80% point so that they'll invest and achieve a self-fulfilling sort of virtuous spiral. They get busy, they invest, they get more efficient, they win more work because they're more competitive, and the thing just keeps spiraling and spiraling better, which is sort of what happened to China over the last 20 years. They had nothing. And they scratched and managed to get the work done. They bought new equipment. They got better. They became more competitive. And we need to do the same thing.
Interesting. Yeah, I would add, at least like to add that the number of requests we at TBM are receiving to identify the how part of reshoring and or nearshoring has actually increased as well. I think somewhat along the lines of what we're seeing in the overall reshoring trends. And these requests are often combined with a desire to reevaluate current domestic operating footprint. So you can see both things happening at the same time, which can make it a bit complex. And then when you wrap the labor productivity piece around it, it becomes really critical to be able to think through that before moving. As you mentioned before, Harry, many times it's a combination of reshoring with nearshoring, not a lift and drop itself. So very interesting.
We had talked about failed reshoring initiatives.
Yes,
so I looked up some of the ones that I knew about, and one of the very well-publicized one recently was Stanley Black & Decker, which had bought the Craftsman line from Sears, which is being produced in China. They reshored to near Fort Worth, Texas. They ordered a very sophisticated, I'm sure unique in the world, automated manufacturing system from Eastern Europe. They hope to significantly reduce their costs to get their costs equal to China, could not get the system to work. They also had COVID and supply chain challenges. They lost internal expertise to retirement. They seem to be coming around, and then and then the company hit a bad profitability spell, and I think they had to cut their losses, so to speak, and they abandoned the project. And so my observation was it's hard to create unique, world-leading automation of products normally requiring extensive manual input during the manufacturing process. Now, it's one thing to get automation that handles things, moves them between stations. But in this case, it was going to move the actual forgings from hammer to hammer, so to speak, and hold it while it was being hit. So very complicated, very difficult. And especially at a location that was not already making these products in a semi-automated way. So they tried to run before they walk, and that's often not a good way to get things done. Another example was Otis Elevator. They reshored elevator production from Mexico to somewhere in the southeast, I'm thinking North Carolina. And due to recession, sales were slow. They thought they had a lot of time, and then orders picked up for the elevators dramatically, and they couldn't deliver, and they couldn't hire the workforce fast enough, and everything was bad for a couple of years. And then finally they got it all together, and everything was okay. Observation, build excess inventory, hire early, make sure you've got insurance on it. Another well-known historic case was Solyndra. This is the case that companies always bring up when they talk about industrial policy and the government picking winners and losers. In this case, the government picked a loser. They were manufacturing their unique method for making solar panels, and then the economics of the alternative method that China was using got a lot better because the raw material costs came down, and the performance of the product, Solyndra's product, wasn't as high as had been promised. And so the whole thing fell apart, went bankrupt, and observation, new products add risk.
To me, what's, if not remarkable, something as a lookout, the first two companies I can say, and we can say, Stanley, Black & Decker separately, and then combined, and Otis as formerly part of United Technologies, had some pretty deep lean experience and successes over decades. And so you might think, well, that would automatically register them as, to be very highly likely to be successful in this effort. Not necessarily. And you also mentioned something that makes me think back to our mentors from Shingizitsu, who taught us how to think about automation and automation, and the steps require not just full automation of everything, but a thoughtfulness around how much automation is necessary for a particular task, which I would think is another example where we're working with clients to understand how best to take them to the next step, as you mentioned, sort of the crawl, walk before you run. As we wrap up here, Harry, any final thoughts on this topic at this moment? I know we're checking in on a regular basis, but today, where we stand, anything you want to have us think about as we finish our discussion today?
Well, for the listeners, the Reshoring Initiative, nonprofit Reshoring Initiative, we'd love to hear about their cases of reshoring, because the only way we know how many there are is we hear about them, people tell us about them. So anybody that has reshored and wants to tell us, we're www.reshorenow.org. And so we love to hear about what you've done, and we can help you if you're trying to make the decision. So we have the TCO estimator to help you compare the two sources. We have the import substitution program to help you identify companies that import the things that your company makes so well, and help you use the TCO estimator to convince that importer to buy from you instead of continuing to import. So we're here to help. So if you have a success to tell me about, let me know. And if you need help making that success happen, call on us and call on TVM. I'm sure Gary would be delighted to help you.
Harry, thank you so much for your time. I want to thank you for your expertise and your continued work around this topic, as we know you were here before it was, let's say, cool to be reshoring. And so we look forward to having further discussions with you going forward and tracking this. We'll also be tracking our overall productivity within manufacturing and several subsectors, which will be a sister component to what we're discussing today. And also, I just want to thank everyone out there for listening. And so until we talk again, have a great rest of the week. Thank you, Harry.
Bye, Gary. Have a great weekend.
You too, sir.